Welcome to the Grace Point Publishing Podcast. Come along with us as we get an exclusive look into what really happens as we co-collaborate with our authors to craft and publish their books. Please see the show notes to find more ways to connect with our creators. And now, here's your host, best-selling author and founder of the Scribes of Light Press with Grace Point Publishing, Danielle Rama Hoffman.
Welcome, everyone. This is Danielle Rama Hoffman, and I am so excited to be joined by one of our Scribes of Light Press authors, longtime spiritual counselor and teacher, Ann Levitt. Welcome, Joanne.
Thank you so much, Danielle. It's a delight to be with you. Delight to be in conversation.
Yeah. So I know you have multiple books, but you have two Scribes of Light Press books, Channeling the Sacred, Activating Your Connection to Source, and Awakening to the Power of Source, Your Guide to Co-Creating with the Divine. So I know we're going to be diving into some juicy source-based topics, but to kick us off here, I was just curious, what inspired you to scribe about Source and the Divine? I don't know if you can share why you're so passionate about Source and the Divine.
Well, that's an easy one for me. And of course, this goes back to 2019 and a delightful journey that I just happened to take with you and for others in southern France. You know, at that time, although I have been teaching for years, both at Kripalu Center and now at Canyon Ranch in the Berkshires, I really think that I had my awakening when I was with you on that amazing journey that we did and discovered, though I was very open to hearing from your guides, from Toth and the Council of Light, I never really connected that I had that potential. And so I'm eternally grateful for, in a sense, the awakening that occurred back then and how that has been nurtured through various activities, exercises, and the channeling process itself to recognize the depth of our connection. And when I say our, I don't mean just you and me. I mean everyone's connection to Source, to all that is, to God, Goddess, Creator, however you want to speak it. We have an amazing ability to access information, connection, new ways of being. And I'm eternally grateful that somehow I ran into one of your books in a bookstore. Forget which one it was. I think it was the Council of Light. And from there on, you could say that I've been lit up.
Yeah, well, there's so much in there that you just shared because one of the titles of your book is Awakening to the Power of Source, and you're speaking about your awakening. And I still remember us being, in this small Magdalene chapel, kind of in the middle of nowhere that was built on top of an ancient chapel of Isis that also has a lot of strong Jesus, Yeshua energy. And I remember that moment, where you received guidance about, kind of next steps and partnering with the guides. And so as we're talking kind of about spiritual advancement and specifically, with your books and the awakening, sometimes we can think we awaken. There's this moment, and there are moments. And yet, you've been a long time spiritual counselor and teacher and passionate about all things spirituality for a long time. So is there anything that you would share about that? For the listeners that may think well, is it just one moment and I wake up, or is there things that get positioned in place, just kind of what you see with your clients and in your own experience about awakening and spiritual advancement in general?
That's a great question, Danielle. And I don't believe it's one moment. There's preparation. And there's hundreds, maybe thousands of, who knows? I couldn't tell you. I can go back and I remember early times when I sat with my dear friend Suzanne, who's a medium who lives in Florida, who channeled various entities and, people who had gone over to the other side. And I was amazed at that capacity and open to it. But there was a difference. And the difference is I honor that other people have that. I honor that in you for sure. It took a long time for me, despite all the teaching and counseling, to awaken or to be open to the fact that there was a similar process going on, that I could connect with my guides more directly. I felt the presence of guides, but it was very hazy and vague. And this was a process of coming more into focus.
Mm, yeah. So, what would you say to folks that may not think that channeling's for them, or they might not think that they have what it takes to channel?
I would say that the first thing is you kind of have to, in a sense, allow the process to awaken in you and also to recognize you're already channeling. You know, we think of it as receiving sublime message, but, what if you're learning a new skill? The first time you ski or cook a casserole or knit, a beautiful sweater, there are steps to be taken. And it's a skill that we may not have in the very beginning, and yet we learn. Now, if you're learning skiing, well, you probably have a ski instructor right here near the mountain. But if you're learning channeling, then it's a process of gradually realizing you are connected. We are connected. And I think we have way too much focus on individualism and individuating. That kind of overrules the fact that we are already engrossed and immersed in a community, which includes folks who are in the flesh and includes beings who are in the light, who are working with us. So it's awakening to the broader community of spirit. And that happens by degrees as we become informed, as messages come through unexpected.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I was looking at your channeling the sacred book, and I kind of want to talk about both of your books, both of your Scribes of Light books in here. And I felt like what we're talking about right now, you have in chapter 4, how do you know what you know? And I'll just read a paragraph here. You say, Joanne speaks, right? Because you kind of differentiate between when it's you, or you also have other channels in this book, or when it's the guides. And you say, as light beings who happen to be wrapped in physical bodies, we first learn about our world through the 5 senses of sight, sound, touch, taste, and smell. Think of a baby crawling around, putting everything they find into their mouths, or a toddler who, with the ecstasy of finally locomoting on their 2 feet, runs back and forth, testing the different sensations between carpet and linoleum on their tiny feet. And you go on to say how, as we grow older, there can be this kind of science-based way of looking at things, or that there can be this logical way of understanding things. And I know in my experience, working with clients, one of the things I hear a lot is, am I making this up? Can I trust this? So as we're talking about, like, how do you know what you know? Like, how can somebody differentiate? Because you also talked about like a medium who may channel someone who's crossed over. So somebody that was alive that then crossed over. Then, like, I work with the Ascended Masters and Guides, which is a different source of channeling. So I'm kind of asking 2 questions here. Like, how is it that someone knows that they're tapped into a guide or some form of higher wisdom? And then, is there anything you would say about the individual's path and which guides kind of come in? Because there is a match there usually.
Well, I'm going to take a couple steps backward because I hear the questions and something beyond them. And it comes back to recognizing when we receive information that doesn't necessarily start out from here. It's not cognitively based. And I'm going to give you a little example that we can move off of. This happened just a week ago at work, or actually 2 weeks ago, when our air conditioning dropped out and that it was really hot. And so I said to my boss, jokingly, because I always joke with him, I said, do you mind if I come into work tomorrow in my bathing suit? And he said, that's not possible. He's a little on the serious side. So jokingly, I said to him, well, I want to see you in your bathing suit. He said, that is not going to happen. So anyway, I went on my way. I forgot about the whole experience and I went shopping. I picked up my mail. I went back home by a different route and I see this figure jogging down the road. He has no shirt on and he's wearing bathing trunks. And as he comes closer, I realize it's my boss. He draws up to my car. He says, "Okay, here's my bathing suit." And that was the same day. And it was like, okay, what created that particular event? What brought us together in such a way? I mean, I was joking. It was nothing serious. And yet somehow spirit worked, conspired to have us meet and laugh at both of us. So I bring that silly example up because I think that there's this convergence, this coming together, not when we're making fun so much, but when we have a need to receive beyond what is available to us through our own cognition. And I think that that's what births, a greater understanding and access to information we ordinarily would not have had. I mean, how many times does somebody show up that you've been thinking about? How many times does the phone ring or somebody text or whatever? And there it is. There are these meetings, and I attribute them to what's going on in spirit and not necessarily right here in 3 dimension. So as we learn and grow, and as we're in a constant process of expansion and evolution, we need access to greater information, to greater knowledge of the spiritual realm. And so it's like we just are putting out feelers and the universe and all the helpers show up and say, "Okay, you want to know this? Here we are." It's the idea of it being a very cooperative and very communal event, not, "Oh, I'm going to write this paper and get the information off the internet."
Yeah, well, and there's that awareness that we have these beautiful minds and the intellect and logic, and they've been a part of certain evolutionary stages in consciousness. And yet what I hear you saying and what the guides talk about a lot as well is that we've come to a place where different tools are required in order to access something else. And the process of channeling or scribing or being open to our higher selves or inspiration, however someone wants to speak about it, it is really like having everybody in their seat, like taking a seat on the Council of the Round Table. But for a lot of us, it's like the intellect has gotten so much prowess and airtime and has the mic. And so it's a process of saying, yes, you have a role when it comes to, because, we're kind of looking behind the scenes as well as we're here on Grace Point podcasts of those authors looking to write and the process of writing. And the Scribes of Light Press, of course, is really about that, tapping into source and channeling and using connection and meditation. And yet there is a part of the book where you say, okay, what are the orders of the chapter? What's the structure? What are some of the ways that ground the heart and soul of that higher consciousness? So yes, the beautiful, brilliant mind has a role, yet it's not flying the plane. It's a passenger. It's a better passenger. It has one seat on the round table of the council. Yeah.
I want to read something from Awakening to the Power of Source that just popped up for me in relation to what you're speaking. You see, in an uncanny way, your creation is calling you out. Your creation is asking for your help to evolve in its power and its efficacy, just as in taking that on reflects back and helps you evolve in terms of your own power and efficacy. In other words, the more energy that you have freed up, the more open you are to inspiration and collaboration. So the more you move into the greater emphasis of what we call as in co-creation. And this is all part of an ongoing evolutionary process. You and your works are simultaneously evolving in essence and in form. And I love what the guides say. They say, we are here in spirit to support you and to grow the wealth of knowledge and expertise together as a collective venture. That's what they popped in and said. And many times it's a joy and a surprise to me. It's a great surprise that there's so much more that is available that I can access and that somehow some little switch got turned on, or something in my brain that resisted got turned off so that I could receive. And I guess that's what I would say to writers that are starting out, check this out. There's a whole realm of amazing information and cooperation if you allow it.
Yeah, I love what you said there too about like something got turned on and something got turned off, because there is a certain level of presence and a softness, like a co-creation, a partnering. I don't want to say yielding, because I think there's a lot of myths and misconceptions about channeling that I know you and I've talked about before, where it's about like people think they get taken over, they're giving away their power. And yet it is a softening and a quieting of, the normal waking consciousness that can be very active, to be opening up to, from the present moment, something beyond what we may currently have awareness of. And to me, that's what I love about channeling. That's why I'm so passionate about it. It's so exciting. I might not know what's coming next, and yet there's so much experience with it's going to be fun. It's going to be great. So it kind of brings me to a question around choice. And I know that in both your books, you speak about choice. And I actually was looking, because I had the channeling of sacred out today, the choice to channel, which actually was something that you weaved in from the guides and Toth via me. And on page 116, they say, the guides, to us, choice is one of the ingredients that is essential to this type of partnership. What we mean by choice is that you're engaging in a sacred partnership ignited out of your desire and your choice to enter into it. You're engaging your free will and your conscious choice. Yeah, so choice comes up in both the books. So let's talk a little bit more about the choice to enter into these partnerships and to co-create.
It's interesting. As you've been speaking to choice, I've been also tuning into something actually that occurred for me when I first started reading Council of Light, Temples of Light, Tablets of Light, your triptych, your three works.
Trilogy of Light, yes.
Trilogy, better than triptych. So this was an awakening that occurred even prior to choice, but I feel like it is essential to the choice that we make to channel. And that is the recognition of equality. And that was an eye opener for me when I read your books, because there's always this notion of higher, lower. It's so much a part of the, religions and even spiritual communities. There's a lama or a guru or somebody that's higher up, and then there's me bowing down at their feet. And this idea of equality between ourselves and our guides was like, whoa, that's incredible. It actually took some time for that to land. And I feel like it's, in a sense, a prerequisite for choice making, because in order to step up to the plate, I have to recognize in my wee little self that I have the expansiveness, the access, and that I can partner with the divine because I've got, the light within me and the means to bring in that beautiful knowledge and awareness. Whereas before, if I was too small and heaven was too far away, there's no way that I could be in connection. So equality and then choice and an awareness that there's so much more that I have access to and that I can access. And then what I said to you before about your creation is calling you forth. My creation is asking me, come on, move on out. Let's get some more, flesh on these bones of this creative act of writing.
Mm-hmm.
I may have gone off in another direction, but I got inspired by remembering equality, égalité, fraternité. What's the other one?
Yeah. Well, in France, liberty. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it is, as we're speaking as well about kind of awakening and our spiritual evolution, because that's also one of the main reasons that I love about partnering and mentoring with light beings in light, such as, the guides, but also incarnate, like such as you and me in form, is that it really advances our spiritual evolution. And so it's ongoing. I feel like the equality and really meeting divine to divine, eye to eye, peer to peer, light being to light being with the guides and source it's evolutionary process. When I see sometimes people like trying to take a back door is like, oh, I'm not ready. I'm not perfect. I don't feel equal to the guides. It's like, for me, the partnership with the guides like recalibrated that whole old paradigm from victim to victimizer, the hierarchy, power over, power under, to really opening up to that equality and equanimity. So I feel like that circles us into, you have awakening to the power of source. And I feel like we're speaking about power as well. So what's the role of that word power in the title of awakening to the power of source?
When I think of power, I just see light bursting, stars, starburst, sun, sunlight, light being the carrier or the conveyor of information, and light that streams to us so quickly. So to me, power, light, information are all interchangeable. And think about just now, you and you're in France, I'm in Massachusetts in America. And what is it that is enabling us to be in such direct communication? Well, ultimately, it comes down to light. Now, of course, I don't know all the details of, the the internet and everything, but I just see it as the expansiveness. I mean, if this were 2 centuries ago, I would have had to write you a letter. And maybe 2-3 weeks later, you would be able to respond, but we would never coincide in terms of presence. But here we are, you're 5, 6 hours later than I am, or are you 5 now? But here we are, we're convening, and I just feel like it's the power of light and the power of spontaneity and the power of a desire, which comes back to choice, which comes back to, I want to develop, I want to learn and grow, and all of everything that is a part of me and a product of me also is growing. And that's the power of this connection and of the power of source, because it comes back to source. That's our common denominator. That's the ingredient that connects us together. They're all one in source.
Mm. Yeah, I know you have an amazing sense of humor. So as you were talking about light and power, I remember, 20 years ago or something, people would say, what do you do? And that's always such an interesting question, right? And at the time I would say, oh, I'm an energy worker. I think I was at a party. And the guy I was talking to said, oh, so you work for the electric company. I was like, no, that's not really what I mean. Yeah.
You could have said, yes, I work for the electric company, but it's broader than, your local site. It goes out to the whole universe.
Yeah. So as we're, jokes aside, but I think that's also one of the myth busters about spirituality is that it has to be serious. And you have such an amazing sense of humor, so I couldn't resist. So as we're talking about power and choice and partnership and co-creation, there really is also the recognition that we are source energy. We are creator beings. And to me, that's also why I love so much the process of my own creations and assisting clients or partnering with clients to create those creations that are calling us, is that it puts us in the seat of being the creator being, which circles back to us being in a greater state of equality. So I feel like I have two questions as we're kind of wrapping up here in the next few minutes. One is there more you would say about us being source, being creator beings, and how the process of channeling helps? And then also for the listeners, like, what are some best practices or tools to channel?
Well, let me speak first, the first part of your question, because I want to add in, there's something important that is needed in this process of channeling, and that is hunger. And I don't mean hunger for food, but it is hunger for the actual act of creating. And the best way that I can describe that is my boss, whom I referred to before, came to me and said, we are blending into our spiritual area, another area called creative expression. And so we're going to be working with our guests, not just through counseling, but also through painting and writing. And I got so excited. I just thought, oh, that's fantastic. And it's because there's this hunger, this desire to keep moving out and creating in different ways. and through different media and so forth. So I think that that is part of what draws us forward. And then whatever we create, as you have said so beautifully, takes on a conscious life itself. It grows and changes as we continue on our path. Our works are growing and creating. So I think that we need that hunger to inspire and take us to the next step of whatever it is we're wanting to bring forth. And in terms of practices, I would say that, the simpler and the quieter you can get, the more you have access. In the Awakening to the Power of Source, I mentioned things like walking in nature, meditating, also do something called toning or sounding, anything that brings you into a space of calm and quiet can function as the precursor to the channeling process. Because we have to kind of quiet down this very active mind so we can open to and receive from greater levels of being, so we can receive in line with what we're asking for.
Yeah, and as you have experience of being a counselor and teacher, and I feel like this applies to what we're talking about here for the listener as well, is that most likely there's positioning or there's been some preparation already. Like I started in counseling and went to massage, and those hours of massage I really felt like helped open me up as well to channeling. And I can imagine your hours of listening and counseling, the channeling is an extension of that. And so for the listeners as well, whether you're a painter or a singer or a teacher or a mechanic or whatever it is that we all do, it's all related and a part of the continuum. So Joanne, I love our conversation today. I feel like we've talked about such extraordinary and key components, from choice to equality to power to recognizing that everyone has what it takes to channel and to know how it is that you know what you know. So really invite those of you tuning in to check out Joanne's extraordinary books, Channeling the Sacred and also Awaken to the Power of Source. And so as we're wrapping up here, any last words or inspirations you want to share?
Well, what popped into my mind was some of the work of Thich Nhat Hanh, a former Vietnamese monk who actually lived for a period of time in France. And he brings up this idea of interbeing, which I love, because he's talking about the being that exists between us, but also the interbeing between us and the divine. And also he speaks about interbeing between us and different species. And again, I love this idea that there's that space that we can connect to among any and all of life. And to me, that's even a broader way to look at channeling, that, we're basically receiving information from everywhere and anywhere at all times. And it's a lovely practice. So thank you too. Thank you for this wonderful opportunity.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Joanne. And thanks to Grace Point for hosting us.
Yes.
And thank you all for tuning in. All right. Much love, everybody.
Thank you for coming along with us today on the Grace Point Publishing Podcast. Join us next time as we introduce you to another one of our incredible authors. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to subscribe and rate us on your favorite podcasting platform. To find out more about our authors and to see how we can help you publish your book, head to gracepointpublishing.com. Keep writing, keep creating, your words matter.